you don't get a full picture if you're only looking at the ends of the binary or one end of the binary or the line. Like, it's a whole constellation of multiplicities. Everything is, including myself.
When she gets going and gets rolling, she is a ball of confidence and fire.
It was nice. It was nice to somehow feel like a movement from the head to the body, or from the head to the heart, and it was just so lovely when she started really letting herself just speak from the heart around what ensemble practice means for her, and you can just feel that, like, this is not a practice, this is her life. Today we are dropping in with Margaret Paek. Margaret teaches dance at Lawrence University. The practice of teaching is integral to her creative process, as she has been a movement educator for over 25 years. Margaret is continually challenged and inspired by her work with Lower Left Performance Collective, and she is deeply influenced by her relationships with gymnastics, contact improvisation, and ensemble thinking. As a collaborative dance artist, her research engages in inclusionary methods and ensemble enterprises, and she is keenly invested in dance as an integrative life practice. She moves under the premise that we are all dancers. We may just not know it yet. We're dropping you into our interview process when Margaret begins to share about her passion, about ensemble thinking, and how that informs and encapsulates her life ideology. And trying to hold that kind of discrepancy of, like, wow, this is really fucking messy, and this has and what I'm saying right now has inconsistencies in what I'm saying, and I'm still going to say it because it needs to be said, and then I want to be criticized and called and invited in on it, and I want to keep on. We need to keep on having the conversation. And
because it's like Paul was just talking about within the constellation, like, you don't get a full picture if you're only looking at the ends of the binary or one end of the binary or the line. Like, it's a whole constellation of multiplicities. Everything is, including myself. And if you only hear one voice, you're only hearing part of it, which is also why I love collective, and even like 3 people talking rather than one, you know.
Right. I remember that so clearly, Margaret, and I've used it so often in the collaborations that I've been part of since we did the residency at Lawrence. But I distinctly remember this moment where you spoke to all of us and you said, like, the 5 of you, Shura Baryshnikov, Bradley Teal Ellis, Paul Singh, Sarah Connor, Aaron Brando, like, any one of you could have come in here and taught a kick-ass residency on your own. And it would have probably been a lot easier and maybe even more cohesive and better. But I am so happy to see the 5 of you struggle through the collaborative process in front of my students, because for me, that's where the value is watching people collaborate, even if collaboration is more challenging. And
it's not even like,
yeah,
it's not even just that it makes me happy. I feel like that is important work. That's, well, I mean, you said it a little bit, but like, to me, it's super valuable work that needs to happen more in the world, that doesn't happen enough. As being part of Lower Left for over 20 years now, that's a long time to work with people, and it's hard work, and it's definitely not more efficient. It's definitely not easier. It's definitely not more clear, but it's more, but I find it so valuable in acknowledging the multiplicity, in acknowledging that there's not one right way, in acknowledging the paradoxes that exist within everything, and that it chips away at this idea we have as human beings that there is one right way, and that there is one answer, and that there's one look to strive for, or way to be, or any of that. And I think that's so powerful, and so what we need, in our society. Hi, Paul.
You just made me think of the silliest. Hi, this is so funny. I was just talking about disruption, and Zoom was like, "Oh, you're hitting a little too close to home. Let's disrupt this." And so our Zoom call just shut itself down. And I was getting to a really good point too, so don't think
Yes,
I
you
wasn't
were.
frustrated. But I was saying I would describe Brando logistically, then I would describe him through a set of lens of like empathy and the way that I see him a different way. And then the third way I would work with him is I would try to dance my version of Brando, like I would try to be him. And
Mm-hmm.
it's an exercise I really like doing. And so what I did with you was I had you describe something logistically to me about disruption and solidarity and resistance. And then the third version, I tried saying it back to you as if I were you, as if I were someone that could embody your slowness, your processing, the entire history of the conversation since we started. And it came out really well. And so it was, I'm proud of me, but I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of the thing in between that ended up making. And the cute thing I was just thinking is my partner right now, it's funny because he can be a perfectionist and argumentative and in certain ways, but what you were just talking about when it comes to cooking and baking, um, we try making these pan banged cookies that you bang the pan in the oven and they melt in this amazing way, and we can't get them to turn out right. We've tried 3 or 4 batches, and he's so forgiving when it comes to baking and trying again and skewing the recipe a little bit. And it's all part of the process. But in other parts of his life, he has a harder time doing that. And it's really going to the credit of what you said of like, there's no right way. And there's such a different set of values and ways that we can all see things. And that's just one arena of how I just think that's such a fun example of that. Silly, but like, oh, it's so funny how you really understand that concept there, but it's harder to apply it to other ways that you have to present yourself in real life, or the way you have to show up to work or a job or other responsibilities. Yeah, I just find that really interesting. I want to ask you about ensemble thinking in lower left a little bit. And would you describe ensemble thinking in 2 ways for me? We'll start with a logistic way, like if you had to write it down or describe it to someone who didn't know a lot about what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, try that one first.
Okay. There's a sentence we have there's now an ensemble thinking website that we worked really hard on collectively. Like it took us like days, months to write that sentence.
As it should.
Yes. And it's something like it's a collection of scores, practices, exercises. I forget which one we settled on, that that create that give vocabulary and articulation to capacity for making collective action, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But with more sentences and more like Margaret woo-woo, ensemble thinking is it's a collection of scores that are ever growing and are open scores and keep changing, and also we keep adding to and taking away from, that help us practice collective action, that help us do things as a collective, as a collaborative, that make things more efficient, that make collective things collective actions more possible, and also illuminate my habits and practices as an individual within a collective.
And lower lefts, for people that are listening, it's a group of individuals that come together, talented improvisers that try to practice those same themes, goals, such a terrible word, but also wonderful same times, those same ideas that Margaret just said. So now I'd like you to...
And I'll just add that Lower Lefts was a collective that started in San Diego with many different people, boiled down to 4 women that I think of as the founders, and then now is global and does all kinds of dance investigations, both in improvised and set choreography, and in performance and in practice.
Okay.
Often I think we get put into improvisers.
Yes. Thank you for
We
clarifying.
are, definitely.
Yes.
But anyway, yes.
No, and you got there, because I'm like, Margaret's too good at combining all the points of the constellation. I'm like, stick to this one point, and she got there. She used words like founders, San Diego, 4 women, performance, and improvisation. Good. So now I wondered if you could describe what you think of as ensemble thinking through the lens of just a more like felt sense space, like what you think it does for you. Just another lens, another filter.
Yeah, I can talk about what it did, what I feel like it does and did for me as a human being. I feel like the practice of it made me who I am, honestly, combined with the practices of contact improvisation and other dance forms. But ensemble thinking actually, I find it very formative in my being of, I was a quiet, like once my coach got really excited because I spoke to him that day, kind of quiet in gymnastics because I was a gymnast, as you said earlier. Super quiet outside in the world. I was a ham at home, but I was super quiet outside. Super good, like I knew how to be a good student. I knew how to listen and watch a teacher and get what they really wanted, no matter what they were saying, and give it to them and get a good grade. I was, like very inside my own box, or I knew what my box was, and that's where I was as a person growing up. Also did not, so I'll just say that. So ensemble thinking, and honestly, ensemble thinking in practice, so it wasn't just like this theoretical thing, it was the practice of it, especially within those 4 women of Nina Martin, Karen Schaffman, Jane Blount, and Mary Reich, who are all still amazing, doing amazing work out there, but Nina's the only one still in lower left, actively. The practice of those 4 women teaching, performing, creating, and the ability to observe and work alongside of them gave me, basically blew open my brain and my body in a million different ways. And the practice of ensemble thinking made me realize, and the practice of lower left alongside with me, into me. I say I sucked and sucked from lower left until I got sucked in, and that's really what it felt like. I felt like I was just like, oh, hi. The practice and that embodied feeling and practice of ensemble thinking in lower left made me realize I had a voice, made me realize I could use it even if it's not my first language, as Lisa Nelson once said, like English or speaking is not my first language, right? And I don't feel like it's my first. That's a Lisa Nelson quote from a festival in Dusseldorf a few years ago. But I don't feel like I'm good at speaking. I feel like that's something I'm still really trying and working on. But ensemble thinking made me realize that I had a voice, and saying my voice was important, even if I'm struggling to do it, kind of in that same constellation way that you were just talking about, Paul. That it's important, because without every single point, then it's just the line with the binary, right? Like, and it's my responsibility and my joy to do that, to keep learning and practicing those things. Not just speaking, but all the things. And that as an artist, I want to have facility in as much variety as possible. I want to be able to lead. I want to be able to follow. I want to be able to complete the form. That's an ensemble thinking score. I want to be able to complete the form. I want to be able to see the form, be able to yeah, I want to be able to see the form. I want to be able to make one idea with 20 different people. I want to be able to have radical autonomy. And these are all words that are embedded in a lot of the scores that we of ensemble thinking. That the physical practice of those scores allowed me to grow into those things as a human being. The physical like manifestation of these kind of philosophical things, practicing those gave me the ability to practice them in other ways as well. And to me, that's the magic of ensemble thinking.
I just want the people that are listening to hear how important these words are going to be past, present, and in the future. Ensemble thinking. Groups of people coming together to think together. And also the way Margaret thinks about working collaboratively in her studios when she's teaching, but in her whole life. Because it's important. Gosh, it's so important what you said about speaking not being your first language. So many people are going to relate to that, but that's not your powerhouse. But moving might be, writing might be. There's so many other ways that you can be identified that can be your powerhouse. And because you're working collaboratively, let someone else pick up the slack for the speaking part while you offer the other part. And that's where working collaboratively is going to be saving us.
And let yourself practice it, knowing that somebody else will, I've practiced my weaknesses because I know that it's not the only voice in the room. You know, because I know I'm not the only one there, I can try on speaking. And I have gotten better since I was 15, you know, I've gotten better and I'm still working on it, but the practice of it is important. The practice in our weaknesses, the things we think of as not weak, if we don't practice them, they stay there, right? And with a collective, I can try them on and be as raw and as vulnerable as Brando was talking about earlier in that document that just came out a week or so ago, and be as different or clashing, and know that there are other voices that will fill in the other parts that will, and I'm using voices metaphorically now, and also literally, that there are other voices in the room, there are other bodies in the room that have different experiences that in a collective where you're all valued and where you all feel the agency to be able to speak, to be able to have your own individual be radically autonomous and also supported by the collective. Within that space, if you've built that community and you've built on that practice of both relying on your strengths and also practicing in your weak areas, that everybody gets better. There's a different, and everybody feels more heard and seen, and the collective can do something that an individual couldn't. Basically, just what we were talking about earlier. But
yeah,
I just want to give credit to the document that we're referring to,
Yes.
something that has come out in the last couple of weeks, as a response to what's happening to many artists, especially gig artists, dancers specifically, in the face of COVID and having their livelihoods shut down with little to no recourse. And what has happened is a document called Creating New Futures was authored by a pretty significant and giant collective of people who represent the global majority in different ways, people of color, indigenous people, queer, trans, uh, and it was somewhat of a gigantic collaborative coming together, that coalesced, and yet there's also an intense amount of radical autonomy that lies there within the document, and there's a constant singling out of people's voices purposely, and then days after, I think it was like 4 days after this document Creating New Futures was published, and circulated, there was a Zoom call that actually critiqued the actual document to sort of put it on the table of, this is a living, imperfect, flawed, inconsistent document that still has disparities riddled within it, and yet is speaking out against the disparities that are happening in our society right now, especially to artists who represent the global majority, and gig artists who are not affiliated with academic institutions. And I just felt so inspired by this document, and I wanted to talk to Margaret about it a little bit, and we did. And there's one other, this concept of radical autonomy, which you've already spoke to, Margaret. It really, I'm just wanting to keep on understanding what radical autonomy
Me too.
means, and how true collaboration, and how the practice of collaboration in some ways gives power to an opening, and a true invitation of radical autonomy, whereas the slippery and dangerous concept is in neoliberalism, or a capitalist system, where radical autonomy is synonymous with oppression, or with competition, or with getting your voice heard above someone else's. And I just want to really distinguish the way in which we're using such a term, and to speak more specifically to maybe your experience of like what actually you mean by radical autonomy, and how it shows up in your work, in your teaching, how you make that happen in your pedagogy and in your life, because it's one of those things where there's, how does collaboration and your commitment to collaboration on every level of your life, how does that continue to inspire an idea of radical autonomy? How are those interrelated for you?
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying, too. That was super important, Brenda. Yeah. So the first thing I thought about, I always, because it's in my experience, in my history, I think about lower left, and lower left when I was a student of Shane, Nina, Mary, and Karen. And I remember being in class, and somebody would teach something, somebody would be speaking and being like, blah, 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 and this is how you do this, and blah, 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 and do it this way. And then across the room, somebody would be like, or not, that doesn't never works for me, and blah, 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 like, blah, 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 and I do it this way, like, or they would just be like, or not, and I can't do that, or whatever. And to have my teachers be contradicting each other, be totally different, they're totally different, amazing forces of nature, all four of them are amazing individuals. And to have them all in the room taking class from each other, contradicting each other, saying radically different approaches, first of all, gave me a place, gave me a way in to be like, oh, my voice is important too. It's not that this is voice and I just need to support this voice always and all the time. Though sometimes that's valuable, right? And I want to be able to do that too. But I also want to be able to know who I am, where I am. Karen Schaffman and Mary Reich had a practice called creative research that was really about digging your own personal stories, emotions, all that stuff coming into your practice of your dance practice, creative practice. And that was right alongside ensemble thinking, alongside contact improvisation. So anyway, this idea that my actual personal person and everything that I am is just as valuable, though of course different from the person next to me, right? And and so if we boil it down physically, in completing the form, you want to have complete radical autonomy. I can do, like, you just make a shape and you stay there, right? I can do like anything I want to, and somebody else then comes in, and somebody else comes in, somebody else then comes in, and each person having their own radical autonomy, being like radically being able to be different, being able to do anything that they want to, and it'll still make a form. It can still make a form sometimes, like, so that's the practice, right? That's what the score. And just that idea that, and sometimes different things get highlighted, or different individuals get highlighted, or different groups of people, different things are illuminated because of the shape of everybody else. And if I just think of it that way and then broaden it metaphorically, is what I feel like is what it is. Like this idea that because there are more than one, if I was just doing this on the street, that would be so different than if I had the group around me, right? And like what a collective could do.
And it's non-hierarchical. That's that's one of the main things that I'm hearing, is that each expression is valuable within the collaboration. And there's where the radical autonomy is that like my expression is just as, what I heard you say is, my expression is just as valuable as the next, and to have that horizontality is then that is the rebellion, because that is not how radical autonomy or individualism works in our society right now. It's like, how can I be better than you? How can I like have my voice be heard over yours in some way?
And when we're working as a collective, we can individually and then therefore collectively decide, like, oh, that voice needs to be heard, I'm going to support it now, right? Or, oh, nope. And sometimes we individually and collectively decide that, and sometimes the form decides that for us, which is also taught to me within the work. Like sometimes I'm doing something and I think I'm supporting somebody, and then I notice, because it's a continual practice of noticing, right, that, oh, everybody is like supporting what I'm doing right now. I am actually in the focus. So the group can give you focus without you even wanting it sometimes. And so there's this dance even within that of like where the focus is, which voice gets heard, other voice gets heard. Like it can't just be one voice all the time. Oh. And it can't just be, that's not a collective. That's not a dance. I don't know, like that's not, like, maybe that is a dance, but it's a dance I don't want to be dancing right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. You're just asking for trouble. That model we've seen tried and failed so many times throughout our history, because everyone counts. Everyone's got that balance. Everyone has something that needs to be said and heard, no matter what the modality that it's chosen. So that's what I love about ensemble thinking and your collaborative spirit, is because it's just a model or just an idea that could really be effective.
So hard. It's so hard. Like,
yeah.
That's something that like I learned it in dance, right? I've learned it within this form, and it's a place where you can really work it out. But like to do it in a classroom has been a practice that I feel like I've gotten better at. But it's still so hard when like, no, I just want you to listen to what I'm saying right now. You know what I mean? Like as a teacher, sometimes you want that. But then I check myself and I'm like, okay, but each voice has a place. And even if it's not the voice I wanted, sometimes that makes it actually a better class or a better, you know, like a better experience, or in the same way that when I think about my experience as a student. And also with this trio that lives in this house with me, like it can be really hard because we're taught as parents, as people becoming parents, that we're supposed to like tell her what to do and know what the right thing is. And sometimes we do, right? Like she shouldn't go running out into the middle of the street, blah, 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 whatever. But like, how do we build a collective? It's so hard in parenting, but yeah, like, and to be able to give everybody agency and voice and the power to self create and self express. It's hard. It's hard.
If we had all the time in the world, I would ask you about being liminal. Between us, there is art, which is a quote from Margaret. I'd ask you about the liminal. I'd ask you about teaching at Lawrence College, which is a music conservatory, but teaching dance in it means you're teaching people that aren't necessarily going to go on to be professionals. But because of that like ambitionless nature, I feel like those students might have even more to offer because there's an excitement around that. I'd also ask you about this thing I wrote down about you, that when you're moving in space, either static or moving, you have the gift of being able to say a lot without doing much. You have this very intense, daring look on your face that holds people very accountable to their choices in the space, but it also says, I'm willing to break my own rules at the same time. It's crazy, and it's a gift. And so there's a prowess that you embody when you're in an improvisationary situation. And I'd ask you about that embodiment. Don't have a lot of time, so those three things I will live with in my soul and answer for myself. The last thing I'll ask, which you don't have to answer.
And we can always have another one of.
We can always have another one. But the last thing I'd ask.
Because it takes me time.
It takes you
time. I feel like
to
we
process.
just got in a groove. Yeah.
So I'll round back to something Brando asked at the beginning with his what ended up being a slurry of questions when we thought it was actually one. Is there? My last question is there anything you're doing to take care of yourself right now in any way?
Oh my God, there's so much. But I just want to say thanks for encapsulating that and for asking all those questions and for telling me that about me, because it's nice to be reflected. And it was, and I also just say, Set Go, which is Shura and Sarah and Brando and Bradley and Paul, which Brando named everybody earlier. But we're just here in Wisconsin, feels like just here in January. And that was such a gift. And I'm still like, that's actually part of that's like a seed that like flipped me into taking care of myself in a different way. And so I really appreciate all of you so much. I am taking care of myself right now by letting myself improvise and focusing on taking care of myself at least part of every day. In a big general way, often, definitely not every day of the week, but probably 3 to 4 days of the week. I wake up early. I go to bed with Ellen. We all sleep in the same bed. So I go to bed with my family at like 9 o'clock. It's been getting later and later. So it used to be 7:30. 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then I will wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. And sometimes it's been getting later too. So 6 in the morning. But then I have this time in the morning that feels like my own. Somehow in the afternoon, it always feels like I should be doing emails, or I should be taking care of academic work or blah, 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 or my daughter, or making food or something. But from like 5 in the morning until about 8 in the morning, usually I have this time, right, about 3 days a week, and I let it be flexible. That's one thing I've really nailed down, is like, oh, it's not something I do every day and that I need to do every day, but that I'm going to do in general. But I do at least one sun salutation a morning right here on this. But it's usually one, and go upside down once a day. And then I have a whole like list and practice of things that I'm returning to after 10 years that I haven't done in a long time, like write in my journal, which I honestly hadn't been, I think I probably wrote 10 times in the last 10 years. And I used to fill up a journal like every 2 months, you know? So I'm writing more regularly in my journal. I am doing some moving. Sometimes I've taken like a couple of movement research classes, a couple earth dance, like things where I can connect with people. And it's really only been a couple, like 2 or 3. But remembering that I'm connected to that outside world since I moved to Wisconsin, and remembering it too, like remembering it in my body, not just knowing it, has been really valuable. Reading some things like the interview that Paul did with Eva. And so like random things that I catch, the other, and some things like, the other article that Brando was just talking about that was put out, but also like Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, Why We Dance by Kimamera Lamoth, and these things like um, and not like actually reading them, but like allowing myself to like read like a paragraph and really soak in it, and not feeling bad for not reading anymore, and then like reading another paragraph like 2 weeks later. Drawing, writing, all these things I do in the morning sometimes for myself. Singing, I got out the guitar again that I know 3 chords on, and like sing the one song that I know how to play. But like these things that like remind me of what I love about myself. And also I noticed as I was writing, because writing helps me reflect, the other morning that I was writing about these incidents in my life, and I was like, oh, they're all Michelle's. But I've been doing a healing session thing with Michelle Boulay, who is an amazing healer dancer. I've been one of my students named Michelle Haberlin just did her honors project. It's the first honors project I've ever done in dance, and that gave me this whole other thing about thinking about dance and thinking about practice and thinking about what I'm giving to students and what I want to give and where I'm lacking and where I want to grow. And then I also watched Michelle Obama's documentary. But so having the time to do those things, like a little bit of reading, a little bit of watching, a little bit of stuff, that feels like it's feeding me too. A little bit of taking class, a little bit of talking to people I love. Ta-da. Yeah. Like all those things I feel like have been, and trying to do something with our family every day, physical, like playing dog or taking a walk or riding bikes or playing badminton. Yeah.
Oh, I love how that just that we came full circle in this. Thanks, Paul, so much for asking that. And Margaret, thank you so much for taking the time. This fills both of us up as well. It's just such a pleasure to get to spend this time with you and to get a slice into your world right now, and your articulation of some of the bigger ideas that you're contending with now, and how you're really using, and how we're all using our somatic experience to cope with not just this pandemic, but with the crises that happen in our daily lives. And you really speak to and live a kind of resilience and a kind of way of being that I admire. So thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank you, Brando. Can I think can I say one more thing?
Of course, yes, definitely.
I think it came out during that Zoom break that we had, that Zoom imposed upon us. But the idea that my improvisation practice, I feel like, has prepared me for this moment, and it honestly doesn't feel as drastic to me because of a lot of privilege I have in my situation, but because of this practice of improvisation, of knowing that I feel like this practice has served me in many ways, of knowing that like nothing is permanent, that you always have to be aware and like noticing self and figuring out where to go and where you are more than where you go, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost what I wanted to say. There's something else. I don't know. Well, let's keep improvising.
Oh, that's such a good note to leave on. Thank you so much, Margaret. Yeah, thank you for your relief, your comfort, your honesty, and just reminding us all that, yeah, what we need is already in there.
Yeah.
It's just how you get it out to the surface with the support that you crave.
Yeah. Thank you both for asking me. I felt so honored to be asked. I'm so excited to talk to you both, because honestly, this kind of stuff helps me process too.